Millions of adults carry a pain they cannot name. It began in childhood, in homes where nothing obvious went wrong, yet something essential was missing. Stay with this until the end, because understanding this could change how you see yourself forever. The invisible wound: a child can grow up in a home where food is always on the table and clothes are always clean, and still walk away from that childhood with deep psychological wounds. The source of these wounds is often something that cannot be photographed or pointed to in a courtroom. It is the persistent absence of emotional response from the people who were supposed to provide it. Countless people struggle to put into their feelings in words. They hold down jobs and maintain friendships and go through the motions of ordinary life. But beneath the surface, there is a constant low hum of feeling deeply flawed. A sense that they are somehow less worthy of love and attention than the people around them. When they try to trace this feeling back to its origin, they often come up empty. Their childhood contained no obvious villains. There were no hospital visits or police reports or screaming matches that left a mark on their memory. What there was, instead, was a pattern so subtle that it barely registered as it was happening. A parent who was physically present but emotionally unreachable. A caregiver whose eyes never quite focused on them with genuine interest. A household where the child's internal world was treated as background noise, rather than something worth engaging with. Psychologists have a term for this experience. They call it childhood emotional neglect. It occurs when caregivers consistently fail to notice and respond to the emotional needs of the child in their care. The child may be housed and fed and sent to school each morning, but their feelings are treated as irrelevant. Fears go unacknowledged. Their joys are met with indifference. And over time, a deep belief takes root in their developing mind. The belief is that what they feel inside does not carry value, and by extension, neither do they. Research suggests that nearly 1 in 5 adults experience this form of neglect during their early years. It's making it one of the most widespread adverse childhood experiences across the globe. Yet it remains poorly understood and rarely discussed, precisely because it leaves no obvious evidence behind. If any of this feels familiar, if you have spent years wondering why you feel so different from everyone around you, why connection seems to come so easily to others while you stand on the outside looking in, you are not alone in that experience. And the heaviness you carry is not a character flaw. It is the natural outcome of growing up in an environment that could not give you what you needed through no fault of your own. What every child needs long before a child learns to speak, they are already absorbing lessons about whether the world will meet them with warmth or indifference. Beyond the obvious physical necessities of food, shelter, and safety, there are emotional requirements that prove equally essential to a child's development. When these emotional needs go unmet, the consequences ripple outward across an entire lifetime. One of the most influential voices in this field was John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist who dedicated his career to understanding the bond between children and their caregivers. His research gave rise to what is now known as attachment theory. According to Bowlby, human infants are biologically driven to seek closeness with a primary caregiver. This drive is not simply about obtaining food or warmth and it is about establishing a sense of security that allows the child to explore the world with confidence. When a caregiver responds consistently and sensitively to a child's signals of distress or need, something remarkable occurs. The child begins to develop what Bowlby called a secure base. This internal foundation tells the child that the world is safe, that their needs are valid, and that they are worthy of care and attention. From this secure base, the child gains the courage to venture outward, to take risks, to learn and grow, knowing that a reliable source of comfort exists when things become overwhelming. But when that consistent response is absent, a very different internal foundation takes shape. The child still adapts, because adaptation is necessary for survival. But this adaptation comes at a cost. Instead of learning that their needs will be met, the child learns to suppress those needs entirely. Instead of developing confidence that they matter, the child absorbs the opposite message. Developmental researchers have identified 3 core elements that children need in order to thrive. The first is physical safety and protection from harm. The second is adequate stimulation and opportunities for learning and exploration. The third, and perhaps most critical for long-term emotional health, is genuine human connection marked by responsiveness and warmth. This third element, the experience of being seen and valued by another person, does more than make a child feel good in the moment. It actively shapes the architecture of their developing brain and forms the blueprint for every relationship they will build throughout their life. The science of being ignored, modern neuroscience, has given us the ability to observe something that was once completely hidden. The physical imprint that neglect leaves on a growing brain. When a child experiences distress and reaches out for comfort that never arrives, their body activates what scientists call the stress response system. This system is designed to help humans survive threatening situations by flooding the body with hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. The heart beats faster, muscles tense, and the mind becomes hyper-focused on potential danger. In short bursts, this response is healthy and helps us escape genuine threats before returning to calm. But when a child lives in an environment where their emotional signals are chronically ignored, this stress response system never fully turns off. The child exists in a state of persistent activation, with elevated cortisol levels flowing through their body day after day. Over time, this prolonged exposure to stress hormones begins to interfere with normal brain development. Neural pathways that should be strengthening instead become disrupted, and regions of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and decision-making develop differently than they would under safer circumstances. Research from Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child has documented how chronic stress weakens the architecture of a young brain. The connections between different brain regions become less efficient, and the child's capacity to manage emotions becomes compromised. Scientists refer to this as toxic stress, distinguishing it from ordinary stresses that are a normal part of growing up. Perhaps most concerning is what happens to the child's baseline emotional state. Because their nervous system has adapted to persistent threat, they develop heightened sensitivity to any signs of rejection. Their brain becomes wired to expect, neglect, and anticipate disappointment before it arrives. What began as a response to environment gradually becomes embedded in biology, shaping how they perceive the world long after childhood ends. The brain remains malleable throughout life, and later experiences can help reshape these early patterns. But the foundation laid during critical early years exerts a powerful influence that many adults spend decades working to overcome. The silent scars, the homes where emotional neglect occurs, often look perfectly ordinary from the outside. And this appearance of normalcy is part of what makes the damage so difficult to address. A child can attend the best schools and wear expensive clothes and still experience profound emotional neglect. The determining factor is not material provision, but emotional responsiveness. When a child's inner world is consistently treated as unimportant, when their attempts to connect are met with blank stares or distracted dismissal, the impact on their developing psyche can be just as damaging as more visible forms of mistreatment. The challenge with emotional neglect is that it leaves no evidence that others can readily observe. A teacher looking at a well-dressed student with completed homework has no way of knowing that this child goes home to a house where nobody asks about their day. A neighbor waving at a family in their front yard cannot see that within those walls. The children have learned to make themselves small and undemanding because their emotional needs have never been acknowledged. This invisibility extends to the children themselves. Unlike a child who is actively mistreated and can identify specific incidents of harm, the emotionally neglected child often has nothing concrete to point toward. They simply carry a vague sense that something is wrong with them, a feeling they cannot trace to any particular source. Many spend years believing they are inherently flawed rather than recognizing that their environment failed to provide what they needed. The behavioral signs of emotional neglect in children can be subtle and easy to misinterpret. Some become excessively compliant, working hard to avoid placing any demands on the adults around them. Others withdraw into themselves, spending hours alone without complaint. Some develop an unusual sensitivity to the moods of others, constantly scanning for signs of approval or displeasure. And some simply stop expressing emotion altogether, having learned that their feelings will not be met with any meaningful response. These adaptations allow the child to survive their circumstances, but they come at a significant cost that often does not become fully apparent until years later. The coping mask's survival in an emotionally barren environment requires creativity, and neglected children become experts at finding ways to cope with what they cannot change. When their environment fails to meet their needs, they do not simply give up. Instead, They develop strategies to manage their circumstances and maintain whatever connection they can with the adults around them. These strategies often persist long after childhood ends, becoming deeply ingrained patterns that shape personality and behavior well into adulthood. One common adaptation is the development of fierce independence at an unusually early age. The child who learns that comfort will not arrive when they cry eventually stops crying altogether. They teach themselves to manage their own distress, to solve their own problems, to need nothing from anyone. On the surface, this independence can appear admirable. Adults may praise such children for being mature beyond their years. But beneath this self-sufficiency lies a painful truth. The child did not choose independence because they were naturally capable. They adopted it because depending on others proved too disappointing to bear. Another adaptation manifests as relentless achievement. Some emotionally neglected children pour themselves into performance. Believing that excellence might finally earn them the attention they crave, they become the perfect students, the star athletes, the children who never cause trouble and always exceed expectations. Every accomplishment represents an unspoken question directed at their caregivers. Is this enough to make you see me now? The tragedy is that external achievement rarely fills the internal void, and these children often grow into adults who cannot stop striving, yet never feel satisfied. A third pattern involves becoming acutely focused on the needs of others. These children learn to read the emotional temperature of a room with remarkable precision, adjusting their behavior to keep those around them comfortable. They become peacemakers and caretakers, always smoothing over conflict and anticipating what others require. Their own needs get pushed so far into the background that they may eventually lose access to them entirely. And then there are those who simply stop trying. After enough experiences of reaching out and finding nothing there, some children conclude that effort itself is pointless. They carry this resignation into adolescence and adulthood, struggling to find motivation or direction because they internalized long ago that nothing they do will make a meaningful difference. There may come a point when the strategies that once protected you begin to feel like a prison. The independence that kept you safe now keeps you isolated. The drive to achieve has left you exhausted but unable to stop. The people-pleasing that earned you approval has erased your sense of who you actually are beneath all the performance. These realizations can be painful, but they are also the beginning of something important. They are signs that a part of you is ready to live differently. Shadows into adulthood, the coping strategies that helped a neglected child survive their early years, do not simply disappear when that child becomes an adult. Instead, these patterns follow them into every area of their grown-up life, shaping their careers, their friendships, and most profoundly, their intimate relationships. Adults who experienced emotional neglect in childhood frequently report a persistent sense of not quite belonging anywhere. They may be surrounded by people who care about them and still feel alone. This chronic loneliness does not respond to simple fixes like joining social groups or making new friends. Research has shown that the emptiness stems from an internal disconnect rather than an external lack of connection. The neglected child grew up without learning how to truly let others in. And as an adult, that barrier remains firmly in place even when they desperately wish it would fall. Romantic relationships present particular challenges for these individuals. Some find themselves drawn to partners who replicate the emotional unavailability of their childhood caregivers. It's unconsciously recreating the familiar dynamic of reaching for someone who cannot fully meet them. Others swing in the opposite direction, becoming so hungry for affection that they attach themselves to anyone who shows them attention, regardless of whether the relationship is healthy. Both patterns stem from the same root wound, a deep uncertainty about whether they are worthy of consistent love. Self-worth becomes a constant struggle for adults carrying these early experiences. Even significant accomplishments fail to shift their internal sense of inadequacy. They may receive promotions, build impressive careers, and earn the respect of colleagues while still feeling like frauds who are moments away from being exposed. The external markers of success simply cannot reach the place inside them that learned long ago to believe they were not enough. Many also struggle to identify and express their own emotions. Having grown up in environments where feelings were ignored, they never developed a rich vocabulary for their internal experiences. As adults, they may know that something is wrong without being able to articulate what that something is. This emotional disconnection makes it difficult to ask for what they need in relationships, perpetuating a cycle of unmet needs that echoes their childhood experience. The paradox of empathy there is an unexpected dimension to the experience of growing up emotionally neglected that rarely receives attention. Many adults who survive this form of childhood adversity develop an extraordinary capacity for understanding the feelings of others. They become the friends who always know when something is wrong, the partners who sense shifts in mood before a word is spoken, the colleagues who notice when someone is struggling and quietly offer support. This heightened sensitivity did not develop by accident. As children, their emotional survival depended on their ability to read the adults around them with precision. They learned to notice subtle changes in facial expression, tone of voice, and body language, because doing so helped them navigate unpredictable emotional terrain. When a parent's mood could shift without warning, the child who could detect early signals had a better chance of avoiding disappointment or conflict. Studies in developmental psychology have confirmed that children who experience neglect often develop advanced skills in reading nonverbal emotional cues. Their brains adapted to an environment that required constant vigilance. And this adaptation persists into adulthood as a finely tuned awareness of the emotional states of others. But this gift comes wrapped in significant cost. The same sensitivity that allows them to perceive what others are feeling often leaves them overwhelmed by emotional information they cannot shut out. They may absorb the stress and pain of those around them, carrying burdens that do not belong to them, while neglecting their own emotional needs. The pattern established in childhood continues into adulthood, with their attention perpetually focused outward, while their inner world remains unexplored and unattended. These individuals often find themselves exhausted by social interactions that others navigate with ease. A single conversation can leave them drained because they are processing far more emotional data than the average person. They walk into rooms and immediately sense tension, sadness, or unspoken conflict, and they carry that awareness with them long after they leave. The cruel irony is that the very skill that makes them exceptional at caring for others often prevents them from receiving care themselves. They have spent so long attending to everyone else that they genuinely do not know how to let the focus turn toward their own needs. Breaking the silence, the wounds of emotional neglect may run deep, but they are not permanent sentences. The same brain science that explains how neglect shapes development also offers genuine grounds for hope. Neuroscientists have established that the human brain retains its capacity to change and form new connections throughout the entire lifespan, a property known as neuroplasticity. The neural patterns established in childhood are powerful, but they are not fixed beyond revision. Healing from childhood emotional neglect begins with recognition. For many adults, simply understanding that their struggles have a name and an origin brings profound relief. The vague sense of being fundamentally flawed starts to make sense when placed in the context of what was missing during their formative years. This recognition is not about assigning blame to caregivers who may have been doing the best they could under difficult circumstances. It is about finally seeing the truth of one's own experience clearly enough to begin addressing it. The next step involves learning to do for oneself what caregivers failed to provide. This means developing the capacity to notice one's own emotions and treat them as valid and worthy of attention. It means practicing self-compassion when old patterns of self-criticism arise. It means learning to identify personal needs and developing the courage to express them to others, even when doing so feels uncomfortable or frightening. Therapy with a professional who understands developmental trauma can provide essential guidance through this process. It's approaches that focus on attachment wounds and emotional processing have shown particular effectiveness in helping adults rewire the patterns established during neglectful childhoods. The therapeutic relationship itself can become a corrective experience, offering the consistent responsiveness that was absent in early life. Perhaps most importantly, healing requires patience and a willingness to believe that change is possible, even when progress feels slow. Every moment of genuine connection, every instance of having one's feelings acknowledged and validated, creates new neural pathways that gradually compete with the old ones. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means finally allowing yourself to matter, not because you earned it through achievement or sacrifice, but simply because you exist. That was always enough. Just took time to learn what no one taught you.